What if everything we know, every city, every monument, every trace of our story, is only the latest layer on a planet that has been wiped clean again and again? Imagine discovering that humanity is not the first civilization to rise, but only the most recent attempt after thousands of resets. Floods swallowing continents, fire raining from the sky, ice advancing like a slow and merciless tide, each cycle erasing nearly all memory of what came before. Archaeologists find scattered anomalies, ruins too old, maps too accurate, myths too consistent to be coincidence. What if these are not accidents, but the whispers of civilizations that lived, thrived, and vanished long before us? Tonight we step into that possibility, into the shadows where myth collides with geology, where forgotten ruins glow faintly beneath oceans, and where time folds back upon itself. Join me as we wander through the silence between resets, listening for the voices of lost worlds that may still echo beneath our feet. The story you are about to hear is not just about the past. It may be about the fragile age we live in now. When we talk about a reset, we often picture something quick and simple: the press of a button, a machine flickering back to its origin. But the Earth does not reset like a clock or a computer. Its resets are vast, messy, and patient. They unfold across centuries or in sudden bursts of violence, but their consequences last for millennia. To imagine that our planet has endured not one or two resets, but thousands, is to confront a vision of history in which permanence is an illusion. Civilizations may rise, flourish, and collapse, leaving little but whispers in stone and fragments of memory in myth. The geological record offers the first glimpse of what a reset means. Scientists have identified at least 5 major mass extinctions in the history of life, each one wiping away the majority of species and opening the stage for something new. The Ordovician extinction drowned marine life when glaciers surged across continents. The Permian extinction, called the Great Dying, erased more than 90% of life, perhaps triggered by massive volcanic eruptions that poisoned oceans and skies. And then, 65 million years ago, the Chicxulub impact darkened the heavens, silencing the dinosaurs and clearing the path for mammals. These are not isolated tragedies, they are rhythms in the Earth's book, reminders that resets are woven into the fabric of deep time. If nature itself has been repeatedly renewed, why not humanity? Our species, Homo sapiens, has walked the Earth for at least 200,000 years. Yet the official story of civilization, farming, writing, cities, law, covers only the last 6,000. That leaves nearly 97% of our existence silent, a span in which we are told little of significance happened. Does that sound plausible, or does it hint at forgotten cycles? What if earlier civilizations rose and fell, their remains swept away by ice sheets, drowned beneath rising seas, or burned to ash in volcanic winters? The silence is not proof of absence, it is what we should expect if resets happened. Consider how fragile our world truly is. Modern cities rely on concrete, steel, glass, and data. Leave them untended, and within decades the wilderness takes hold. Studies of urban decay suggest that in just 500 years, forests would bury skyscrapers, bridges would collapse, and rust would reduce steel to powder. After 10,000 years, little would remain but fragments of stone and traces in the soil. Add the violence of catastrophe, flood, fire, earthquake, or shifting glaciers, and nearly all evidence would vanish. If a civilization as advanced as ours had existed 50,000 years ago, would we expect to find more than scattered anomalies? Even myth seems to understand resets as more than single calamities. Across cultures, the world is not created once but many times. In Hindu cosmology, ages known as yugas follow each other in endless succession, each ending in destruction before renewal. In Mesoamerican tradition, humanity lives under the fifth sun, after 4 previous ages collapsed. In Norse mythology, Ragnarok destroys the world in fire and ice, only for green fields to rise again. These myths are not identical, yet they share a structure. The world ends, life is nearly extinguished, and then a new dawn begins. They are memory cloaked in story, suggesting that people across time have sensed or survived resets and tried to warn those who would follow. Science and myth intersect most clearly in the cycles of ice. For millions of years, Earth's climate has oscillated between glacial and interglacial periods. Vast ice sheets have advanced, crushing continents beneath kilometers of frozen mass, then retreated, sending seas rushing across the land. Each cycle redrew the map of the Earth. If civilizations thrived along the ancient coasts, as ours does today, their cities would now lie drowned beneath the ocean. The silence we encounter in archaeology may not be an absence, but a burial. Think too of volcanic winters. The eruption of Mount Tambora in 1815 darkened skies worldwide, creating the year without a summer. Crops failed, famines spread, and millions suffered, all from a single eruption. But that was minor compared to the Toba supervolcano 74,000 years ago, which blanketed much of the planet in ash. Genetic studies suggest that humanity itself nearly perished then, reduced to a few thousand individuals. If smaller resets can nearly extinguish us, how many times could larger ones have erased entire worlds we no longer remember? To speak of resets is to recognize that permanence is fragile. Civilizations are not ladders climbing endlessly upward, but waves rising and falling. The ruins of Angkor Wat swallowed by jungle, the city of Pompeii sealed under ash, the abandoned ghost towns of our own time. Each is a small rehearsal of what Earth has always done. Multiply these rehearsals across thousands of years, and the possibility of forgotten ages becomes not only plausible, but likely. The meaning of a reset, then, is not only destruction, it is also transformation. Old worlds collapse, but from their silence, new ones emerge. Species evolve, cultures rebuild, myths carry memory. The Earth erases, but it also renews. To imagine thousands of resets is to imagine countless beginnings, each one fragile, each one impermanent, each one carrying fragments of what came before. If resets shaped our past, what traces of earlier worlds lie hidden beneath our feet? And how many times has humanity begun again, unaware of how many chapters have already been turned in Earth's endless book? Civilizations, no matter how vast or powerful, are fragile when set against the restless movements of the Earth. What feels permanent in the span of a human life is nothing but dust in geological time. To understand what a reset means for humanity, we must confront a difficult truth. Almost everything we create is temporary. Stone, steel, glass, even words on paper, all of it vanishes sooner than we wish to imagine. Archaeologists and environmental scientists have long studied what is called urban decay. Their models show how quickly even our most enduring cities would disappear if left untended. Within a few decades, vegetation would invade streets, roots prying apart concrete. Within centuries, buildings would collapse under their own weight as steel rusted and wood rotted. Within 1,000 years, most skyscrapers would be indistinguishable from rubble and bridges would lie in ruins. In 10,000 years, the jungle or desert would have swallowed almost everything. Only a few stone monuments might remain, and even they would be weathered into unrecognizable fragments. We do not need to imagine this only through simulations. The Earth already offers examples. In Cambodia, the great city of Angkor was once the center of a sprawling empire, filled with palaces, temples, and canals. When the city declined, the jungle reclaimed it. For centuries, it lay hidden under roots and vines, known only to local legends until rediscovered by explorers. In Italy, Pompeii was buried instantly under volcanic ash from Mount Vesuvius. Entire streets, murals, and homes were sealed away, forgotten until they were uncovered nearly 2,000 years later. Even in our own time, ghost towns like Pripyat near Chernobyl show how swiftly nature reclaims what we build. Grass grows through pavement, deer wander through abandoned apartments, and silence blankets the streets once filled with human life. If this is what happens to cities we know, cities only hundreds or thousands of years old, what chance would evidence of civilizations tens of thousands of years older have? The Earth is not an archive that preserves, it is an eraser that endlessly rewrites. Rivers flood and shift their courses, burying settlements under silt. Deserts expand, covering once fertile lands. Earthquakes reduce stone structures to rubble. Entire coastlines sink as sea levels rise. The process is slow but absolute. Consider materials themselves. Wood and textiles decompose in centuries unless sealed away in dry caves or frozen in ice. Metal corrodes quickly. Bronze and copper turn to green powder. Iron rusts into nothing. Even durable substances like glass fracture and weather. Only stone endures. And even stone under rain and wind crumbles over millennia. When we look back into the deep past, therefore, we should not expect to find intact machines, documents, or cities. We should expect fragments, an inexplicable stone carving, a tool embedded in rock, a ruin half buried by the sea. One striking modern study explored what archaeologists in the far future would find if humanity vanished today. The researchers concluded that only a thin layer in the geological record would remain, rich in plastics, radioactive isotopes from nuclear testing, and traces of industrial chemicals. Skyscrapers would not survive, but microplastics in ocean sediments might. Highways would vanish, but small objects like glass beads, pottery, or metal coins could endure. In other words, the grand structures would be gone, while only scattered fragments would remain, misleading to anyone who tried to reconstruct our world. If that is true for us, why would it be different for civilizations before us? The silence in the archaeological record may not be emptiness, but the natural outcome of erasure. If civilizations existed during earlier ages, the chances of their survival into our view are vanishingly small. We must therefore train ourselves to look differently, to treat anomalies not as isolated curiosities, but as possible survivors of resets. Think of submerged ruins like those near Dwarka in India or Yonaguni in Japan. They may not reveal sprawling metropolises, but even their faint outlines challenge the neat timelines of history. Or consider the discovery of a single worked piece of wood in a layer of sediment tens of thousands of years older than expected. To mainstream science, it is an anomaly, but in the context of resets, it becomes a clue, a fragile trace of a world erased. In this sense, archaeology is an art of shadows. We are trying to read stories from what remains after fire, water, ice, and time have done their work. The absence of evidence should not be confused with evidence of absence. Resets ensure that most civilizations leave little behind. What we call prehistory may not be the story of humanity before civilization, but the story of humanity after many civilizations have already been lost. The fragility of evidence is also why myths matter. When material traces are erased, stories can endure across generations, preserving memory long after ruins are gone. The flood stories of Mesopotamia and India, the fire myths of the Americas, the cycles of the Aztecs and Hindus. These may be the oral shadows of civilizations whose physical remains have been scattered or drowned. So when we confront the silence of the record, we should not see emptiness, but possibility. We should see the eraser at work, the patient hand of the earth sweeping away monuments, cities, and archives, leaving only the faintest fragments. Each shard of pottery, each submerged ruin, each anomalous artifact becomes precious, because it may be the sole survivor of a reset. And so the question deepens. If nearly everything is lost, what do we make of those sudden leaps in history, those bursts of culture and technology that seem to appear overnight? Are they really beginnings, or are they returns, fragments of memory igniting again after long silence? When we look back into the earliest chapters of human history, the silence is striking. For nearly 200,000 years, anatomically modern humans existed. The same bodies, the same brains as ours. And yet the record shows little change. Stone tools remain nearly identical for tens of millennia. Hand axes and flakes appear, vanish, and reappear with barely any evolution in design. To archaeologists, it looks as if humanity drifted in stillness, repeating the same patterns endlessly. And then suddenly, around 40,000 years ago, something shifted. This shift is often called the creative explosion. In caves across Europe, walls came alive with paintings of bison, mammoths, and horses, rendered with artistry and motion. In Chauvet Cave in France, scenes of animals running and fighting glow with lifelike energy, dating back more than 30,000 years. At the same time, small carved figurines, the Venus figurines, appeared, symbols of fertility and ritual. Bone flutes from Germany sang melodies long lost, proof that music accompanied those early nights by the fire. Why, after hundreds of thousands of years of apparent stillness, did culture bloom so suddenly? Some scientists suggest the emergence of complex language, others point to a genetic mutation that altered the brain. Yet another possibility lingers. Perhaps humanity was not beginning something new, but rediscovering. If earlier civilizations had risen and fallen, their memory may have lingered in fragments, stories of how to carve, paint, or build, waiting to be reawakened when the earth grew stable again. Hints of such forgotten attempts appear far earlier than the creative explosion. In Blombos Cave in South Africa, pieces of ochre carved with crosshatched designs have been dated to nearly 75,000 years ago. These markings are abstract, symbolic, and deliberate, the oldest known art in the world. In the same cave, beads fashioned from shells show evidence of personal adornment, identity, and perhaps even trade. Elsewhere, at sites like Pinnacle Point, evidence of fire use and advanced hunting strategies suggests that humans were already experimenting with complexity, yet these sparks were followed by long silences, as if erased by catastrophe. Genetics provides another clue. Around 74,000 years ago, the Toba supervolcano erupted, releasing ash across continents. Scientists believe this event caused a global volcanic winter, plunging humanity into near extinction. Some genetic studies suggest our species was reduced to a few thousand individuals. If cultures had flourished before Toba, their knowledge may have vanished with those who perished. Survivors may have clung only to the basics of survival, leaving no durable evidence behind. Is it possible that the long silence in the record is not absence but aftermath? Another dimension to this puzzle is geography. The most fertile places for early human settlement were coastlines and river valleys. Exactly the landscapes drowned by rising seas when the Ice Age ended. If people built along these ancient shores, their traces now lie more than 100 meters underwater. We have explored only a fraction of the ocean floor, which means much of the earliest story of humanity may still be hidden beneath waves, unreachable and unseen. The silence of archaeology, then, may be more about where we have not looked than what truly existed. Even the artifacts that survive raise questions. Why do we find long periods of uniform tools, followed by sudden leaps forward? Why does symbolism, art, and ritual seem to appear in bursts, as though someone remembered what was once forgotten? If resets erased much of humanity's earlier attempts at culture, then the explosions we see may not be inventions but recoveries. Think of knowledge as embers scattered after a fire. For generations, people may have carried only a dim glow, enough to survive but not to thrive. Then when the world stabilized, those embers ignited, bursting into new flames of culture. What appears to us as a miraculous leap might simply be the return of skills once practiced in an earlier age. The silence also speaks through what we do not find. Wooden structures decay, textiles rot, bones crumble. Unless preserved in rare conditions, frozen in ice, buried in ash, sealed in caves, they vanish entirely. Over tens of thousands of years, whole worlds could disappear. The silence, then, is not proof that nothing existed. It is proof of how well the Earth erases. And so we are left with a haunting possibility that what we call the dawn of humanity is only the latest sunrise after countless forgotten nights. The great silences in the record may be voids left by resets, gaps where civilizations rose and fell before us. Here is a thought to carry with you. If humans like us have existed for 200,000 years, but we only see about 6,000 years of civilization, what stories are missing from the other 97%? Could entire cycles of history, entire forgotten ages, be hidden in that silence? Where do you stand on this mystery? Do you believe silence means absence, or that it hides erased worlds? Share your thoughts. Your reflections may carry this question further into the conversation across time. And when silence finally breaks, the first voices we hear in myth are those of floods. Waters rising to erase entire worlds, leaving survivors to begin again. From the quiet void of forgotten ages, we now step into the stories of deluges, where oceans themselves became the agents of reset. Across the globe, from the mountains of Mesopotamia to the islands of the Pacific, one story repeats. The world drowned. Water surged without mercy, swallowing valleys, coasts, and cities, leaving only a handful of survivors to begin again. These flood myths are not isolated inventions. They form a chorus of memory, echoing across cultures that never knew each other, separated by oceans and millennia. The Epic of Gilgamesh, carved on cuneiform tablets 4,000 years ago, tells of Utnapishtim, warned by the gods to build a vast boat. He sealed his ark with pitch, loaded animals 2 by 2, and drifted above waters that erased the world. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah repeats the same story. A righteous man guided to build an ark, carrying his family and the seeds of life across endless floods. In India's Satapatha Brahmana, the sage Manu is warned by a divine fish, Matsya, who pulls his vessel to safety as waters consume the earth. In Greece, Deucalion and Pyrrha cast stones behind them after surviving a flood, and the stones transform into humans, repopulating the land. Even in distant Polynesia, myths describe waves swallowing islands whole. In Central America, Mayan and Aztec traditions speak of earlier ages destroyed by water. And among Native American tribes, oral traditions recall floods so immense that mountains became islands. The similarities are too striking to dismiss as coincidence. They suggest memory, not just of one flood, but of many across resets. Geology provides the stage on which these myths may have been written. At the end of the last ice age, between 12,000 and 8,000 years ago, sea levels rose more than 120 meters as glaciers melted. Entire coastal plains were drowned. Sunderland, a vast region connecting today's Indonesia and Malaysia, vanished beneath the rising ocean. Doggerland, once a fertile land bridging Britain and Europe, sank under the North Sea. In the Americas, meltwater floods carved immense canyons and reshaped entire river systems. For those alive at the time, it would not have been a distant, slow process. To them, the seas were alive, creeping closer each year, swallowing farms, forests, and villages. Within a few generations, entire homelands had disappeared. Archaeology adds more weight to the story. Off the coast of India, near modern Dwarka, sonar has revealed walls and streets now buried underwater. Pottery and tools recovered there suggest antiquity far older than the official timeline of Indian civilization. In Japan, divers explore the Yonaguni Monument, terraces and steps carved into rock, submerged since sea levels rose. And in Greece, Pavlopetri lies just a few meters beneath the water, a Bronze Age city still visible in outline, preserved by the sea. These are not isolated oddities. They are glimpses into how fragile coastal settlements are when the ocean rises. If floods have drowned younger cities that we can still find, how many older ones lie deeper, lost beyond reach. Modern science has also uncovered evidence of sudden and violent floods. The Missoula floods in North America, caused by the bursting of glacial lakes at the end of the Ice Age, sent walls of water hundreds of feet high racing across the land. They scoured valleys, moved boulders the size of houses, and left ripple marks still visible today. In the Black Sea region, sediment cores suggest that a massive influx of seawater around 7,600 years ago may have inspired flood stories in the Near East. These events were not gentle, they were catastrophic, reshaping entire regions within days or weeks. The persistence of flood stories across cultures suggests they were more than metaphor. Survivors would have carried memories of waters that erased everything familiar. To protect those memories, they shaped them into myths, embedding warnings for future generations. The world has drowned before, the stories whisper. It can drown again. For us, living in cities built along the coasts, the message is sobering. More than half of humanity now dwells within a short distance of the sea. If another great melt or surge were to come, our towers and harbours would vanish as surely as the temples of Dwarka or the villages of Doggerland. The ocean has always been both cradle and eraser of civilizations. Floods are patient resets, but they are not the only ones. Myths also remember fire, sudden, merciless, falling from the heavens without warning. From the quiet swallowing of waters, we now turn to the blazing violence of the sky itself, where resets arrive not in tides, but in flames. Above us, the night sky looks calm, a velvet dome scattered with stars, silent and reassuring. But hidden in that darkness are countless wanderers, asteroids, comets, and fragments of stone and ice, each following paths older than memory. Most pass quietly, burning only as streaks of light. Yet from time to time, one collides with the Earth, releasing energy beyond imagination. Fire from the sky has more than once ended ages of life, and it may also have triggered resets of human civilizations we no longer remember. The most dramatic example is etched into the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. 65 million years ago, a mountain-sized asteroid struck what is now Chicxulub. The explosion released more energy than billions of nuclear bombs. Shockwaves circled the globe, igniting forests on multiple continents. A tsunami hundreds of meters high raced across oceans. Dust and vapor rose into the stratosphere, blocking sunlight and plunging the Earth into darkness. Dinosaurs, who had ruled for more than 150 million years, perished almost overnight. In their absence, mammals inherited the world. This was not just a catastrophe, it was a reset, an erasure of one age and the birth of another. But resets did not end with the dinosaurs. Around 12,800 years ago, as the Ice Age was ending and climates warmed, the world was suddenly thrown back into glacial cold. This period, known as the Younger Dryas, lasted over 1,000 years. For decades, scientists puzzled over its cause. In recent years, evidence has pointed toward an extraterrestrial trigger. In layers of sediment dating to that time, researchers have found microscopic diamonds, magnetic spherules, and soot, all signatures of cosmic impacts and wildfires. Some propose that a fragmented comet struck the Earth, with pieces crashing across North America and Europe. The result would have been apocalyptic: firestorms raging across continents, megafauna vanishing, and early human cultures forced to the edge of survival. If a young civilization had flourished then, its destruction would have been almost complete. Myths from around the world echo this theme of heavenly fire. In Mesoamerica, traditions tell of earlier suns destroyed by flames raining from the sky. Certain Native American stories describe the firmament cracking open, with fiery stones scattering across the land. In Norse mythology, the fire giant Surtur wields his flaming sword at Ragnarok, setting the heavens ablaze. In Hindu cosmology, the god Shiva dances destruction through fire, ending one cycle to prepare for another. These fiery endings may not be imagination alone. They may be memories, cultural echoes of times when the sky itself became a weapon. The Tunguska event of 1908 offers a glimpse of what even a small impact can do. A comet or asteroid exploded in the air above Siberia, flattening 80 million trees across an area larger than some countries. Fortunately, the region was uninhabited. Had Tunguska occurred above a city, it would have left ruins as haunting as Pompeii. In 2013, a meteor exploded over Chelyabinsk, Russia, shattering windows and injuring over 1,000 people. And that was a fragment only 20 meters wide. Fire from the sky remains a danger in our own time, proof that resets are not confined to the distant past. The destructive power of these impacts is staggering. Scientists estimate that an asteroid 1 kilometer across could trigger global famine by darkening skies and collapsing ecosystems. A body 10 kilometers wide, like Chicxulub, would be enough to erase most life. Yet the solar system is filled with such objects. Thousands of near-Earth asteroids are tracked, but many more remain unseen, hidden against the glare of the sun. It is not a matter of if, but when. If humanity has already endured resets from fire, what traces would survive? Likely very little. Ash layers may hold evidence of burning forests. Sediments may capture strange minerals forged in the heat of impact. But cities, stories, and technologies would vanish, leaving only myth to preserve the memory. The younger Dryas hints that something like this may have already happened to us. A fragile culture could have existed then, erased by flames, remembered only as the world's flood and fire myths. Fire from the sky is the swiftest of resets. Floods drown slowly, ice creeps forward with patience, but cosmic impacts strike without warning, erasing centuries of growth in a single day. For survivors, the aftermath would be a world unrecognizable. Skies clouded with dust, soils scorched, animals gone, and climates turned hostile. In such conditions, even the most advanced society would fall back into silence. Yet fire is only one element in the cycle. After the flames come the shadows, as volcanic ash or advancing glaciers dim the sun and smother the earth in cold. From fiery resets that strike in an instant, we now turn to the slow, lingering winters that follow. The winters of ash and ice. Not every reset comes in a flash of fire or the roar of floodwaters. Some creep slowly, wrapping the world in silence and cold. They are the winters of ash and ice. Catastrophes that do not burn the earth in an instant, but choke it gradually, dimming the sun, starving the land, and testing humanity's ability to endure. One of the most chilling examples is the Toba supereruption, which erupted in Indonesia roughly 74,000 years ago. Scientists believe it was the largest volcanic event in the last 2 million years. When Toba exploded, it hurled billions of tons of ash and gas into the atmosphere, blanketing South Asia with layers several meters thick. The skies darkened for years, and global temperatures may have fallen by 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. Crops and wild plants would have failed. Herds of animals would have declined. And genetic evidence suggests that humanity itself was reduced to a tiny remnant, perhaps only a few thousand individuals. Imagine the fragility of that moment, nearly all knowledge, culture, and history condensed into the memories of a few scattered survivors. If civilizations or proto-civilizations had existed before Toba, their traces may have been erased forever beneath ash and time. Volcanic winters have haunted even recorded history. In 1815, Mount Tambora erupted in the same region as Toba, though on a smaller scale. The eruption released so much ash and sulfur into the atmosphere that 1816 became known as the year without a summer. Across Europe and North America, crops failed. Frost struck in June and snow fell in July. Famine spread and tens of thousands died. Even this relatively recent event reminds us how thin the margin of survival can be when skies turn dark. Multiply Tambora's effects 100-fold, and we glimpse the devastation of Toba. The Earth also delivers resets through ice. For millions of years, our planet has cycled between glacial and interglacial periods. During the last glacial maximum, massive ice sheets stretched across North America, Europe, and Asia, burying landscapes under kilometers of frozen mass. Entire ecosystems vanished beneath the crush of ice. Any evidence of human habitation in those regions would have been scoured away, ground to dust by the weight of glaciers. When the ice finally melted, it did not return the land as it was. It drowned coastlines, shifted rivers, and carved valleys anew, leaving survivors to navigate a world utterly changed. Glacial advances were not gentle. They were relentless. Vast walls of ice moved like slow-motion bulldozers, flattening forests, redirecting rivers, and reshaping continents. Boulders known as glacial erratics were carried hundreds of miles and dropped in foreign landscapes when the ice retreated. Meltwater carved canyons and created inland seas. For early humans, these shifts must have felt like the world itself was being torn apart and rebuilt. Survival meant constant adaptation, abandoning fertile valleys when they froze, and chasing game into shrinking habitable zones. Myths remember this cold. Norse cosmology begins in Ginnunga Gap, a yawning void of ice and frost, and ends with Fimbul Winter, 3 years of unbroken snow and cold that precede the world's rebirth. Among Native American traditions, tales survive of endless winters when the sun disappeared and the land lay buried in ice. These memories align eerily with the cycles geology reveals. Humanity endured not only heat and flood, but winters so deep they silenced entire continents. What makes winters of ash and ice uniquely devastating is their endurance. Fire from the sky burns quickly. Floods sweep away coasts within days. But ash winters linger for decades, and ice ages for millennia. They erase not only cities, but continuity itself. Knowledge fades when generations live only for survival, when stories of planting, building, or astronomy no longer serve a purpose in the struggle for food and warmth. Civilizations do not just collapse under such winters, they forget. And this forgetting is perhaps the most dangerous part of resets. The silence that follows is not empty, it is heavy with what has been lost. When warmth and stability finally return, survivors may rebuild, but they do so from fragments. To us, it looks as though civilization begins suddenly, farming, writing, cities. But in truth, it may be the slow return after the long dark, memory reigniting after silence. The winters of ash and ice teach us that the earth itself is an eraser. It buries and grinds, covers and freezes, ensuring that only the most durable traces survive. Yet even as glaciers advanced and ash blanketed the land, people may have built along coasts, seeking abundance from rivers and seas. When the ice melted, those coasts drowned. The ocean became a second eraser, hiding entire chapters beneath its surface. From the frozen breath of ash and ice, we now descend into the depths, to search for the lost cities that sleep beneath the waves, the sunken remnants of civilizations erased by rising seas. If floods are the great erasers of history, then the ocean is their silent archive. Beneath the restless waves lies a hidden world, coastlines, valleys, and perhaps entire cities swallowed when the last ice age ended. As glaciers melted, seas rose more than 120 meters, drowning vast areas of land that had once been fertile plains and bustling harbors. Today, nearly all major cities are coastal. It is logical to imagine that ancient peoples, too, would have built their homes where rivers met the sea, where food was abundant and trade routes flourished. If that is true, then the ocean floor may hold the richest chapters of forgotten history. Some glimpses of this hidden record have already emerged. Off the coast of Japan lies the Yonaguni Monument, a massive underwater structure of terraces, steps, and platforms. Divers describe sharp angles, flat planes, and geometric shapes that resemble human construction. Some argue that it is natural, shaped by geological forces. Yet the precision of its edges and the scale of its formations lead others to believe it is the remnant of a city submerged over 10,000 years ago when sea levels rose at the close of the Ice Age. Whether natural or man-made, Yonaguni sparks a question. If even one such site proves artificial, how many other drowned cities might still lie undiscovered? India's coast offers another clue. Near the modern city of Dwarka, sonar scans have revealed the outlines of walls, streets, and structures now buried beneath the Arabian Sea. Ancient Sanskrit texts describe Dwarka as a glorious city built by Krishna, shining with palaces and temples before being consumed by the ocean. Archaeologists have recovered pottery, anchors, and tools from the seabed, suggesting human habitation thousands of years ago. If this Dwarka corresponds to the mythical city, then here myth and archaeology meet, pointing to memory preserved in story and stone alike. In the Mediterranean, Pavlopetri in Greece lies only a few meters beneath the surface. Its streets, courtyards, and chambered buildings remain visible, preserved by the sea for over 5,000 years. Recognized as the oldest submerged city yet found, Pavlopetri proves that entire urban settlements can be swallowed and preserved underwater. And if one has survived so clearly in shallow water, how many older sites might lie in deeper seas, unseen and unexplored? Other hints surface elsewhere. In the Gulf of Khambhat in India, sonar has revealed vast geometric patterns stretching for kilometers, suggestive of large settlements now drowned. In the Caribbean, legends tell of shining cities beneath the waves. In the Black Sea, sediment cores reveal that around 7,600 years ago, seawater poured in from the Mediterranean, flooding lowlands and transforming the region overnight. Could these memories of catastrophe have been preserved as flood myths, carried forward until written civilizations gave them form? Science supports the plausibility of these stories. During the rapid melt at the end of the Ice Age, seas rose at times by several meters within a century. For coastal dwellers, this would have been catastrophic. Entire generations would have watched ancestral lands vanish. A city built near the shore could become a reef within lifetimes. Survivors fleeing inland would carry tales of a world swallowed by water, shaping myths that later cultures preserved as sacred warnings. The ocean is not a passive grave. Its salt and currents erase as effectively as they preserve. Wooden beams dissolve, metals corrode, and only stone endures. This is why the ruins we find are often only fragments, foundations of walls, pillars, or terraces. Yet these fragments matter. They are enough to prove that what lies beneath is not emptiness, but story. The Earth's drowned coastlines are littered with traces waiting for discovery, though most remain hidden in the vastness of the sea. And if we have already found Dwarka, Yonaguni, Pavlopetri, and more, then it is almost certain these are not exceptions but hints. Beneath every drowned plain and vanished shore may lie the outlines of entire forgotten civilizations. The sea has preserved these whispers of the past, but stone monuments on land tell another story. Built with impossible scale and precision, they stand where floods could not reach, carrying knowledge and memory across resets. From the drowned archives beneath the waves, we now turn to those enduring structures on land, the monuments that should not exist. Across deserts, mountains, and forgotten valleys, colossal stones rise where they should not. They defy the neat timelines of archaeology, standing as if to mock the story we tell ourselves about the past. According to mainstream history, civilization is only 6,000 or 7,000 years old. Yet scattered across the world are monuments so old, so massive, and so precise that they whisper of knowledge carried from forgotten ages. If Earth has faced resets again and again, then perhaps these monuments are the stubborn survivors, stones that endured when everything else was washed away. Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey is the clearest example. Unearthed only in the 1990s, it dates back at least 12,000 years, thousands of years earlier than agriculture, writing, or permanent cities were supposed to exist. Its circular enclosures, filled with T-shaped pillars carved with animals and abstract symbols, reveal a level of organization and skill historians never expected from hunter-gatherers. Some stones weigh more than 10 tons, quarried, transported, and erected with deliberate planning. Why would people with no farms, no villages, and no writing invest such energy in monumental architecture? The site suggests either that our understanding of prehistory is wrong, or that survivors of a reset carried memory into a new age and built Göbekli Tepe as a ritual reminder of what was lost. Travel across the Atlantic to the high altiplano of Bolivia, and you encounter Puma Punku. Its blocks are cut with geometric precision so exact that even modern engineers puzzle over them. Some stones weigh over 100 tons, shaped with interlocking grooves and drilled holes that suggest advanced tools. Yet conventional history insists this was accomplished by people without metal, without wheels, and without writing. Was Puma Punku an invention of sudden genius, or was it a reconstruction, a faint echo of technologies remembered from an earlier cycle? The precision of its stones seems to say, we are not looking at beginnings, but survivals. Could these monuments be the last surviving messages from worlds erased by resets? What's your take? Egypt tells a similar story. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built more than 4,500 years ago, is aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal directions. Its base is level to within fractions of an inch, and its proportions encode mathematical relationships that include pi, the golden ratio, and even the circumference of the Earth. How could such knowledge appear so early without precedent? Some argue the pyramid was not merely a tomb, but a time capsule, a monument designed to carry fragments of science and astronomy across ages, surviving resets to remind future generations that advanced knowledge once existed. Even in Europe, where Stonehenge stands amid grassy plains, we find the same mystery. Its massive stones were dragged for miles, arranged to mark solstices with uncanny precision. For farmers and herders of 5,000 years ago, why would the movement of the sun matter enough to build such a structure? Perhaps because their ancestors had survived cycles of ice and flood. Perhaps Stonehenge was not just a calendar, but a monument to memory, a warning etched in stone that the rhythms of the heavens could bring both abundance and catastrophe. What unites these sites is not only their scale, but their isolation. They appear like outliers, anomalies that mainstream history explains away as extraordinary achievements of otherwise primitive cultures. Yet if viewed through the lens of resets, they make sense. Survivors of catastrophe may have remembered fragments of geometry, astronomy, and engineering. They could not rebuild everything, but they could raise monuments, durable, immovable, resistant to fire and flood, to preserve what little they could. In this sense, monuments are memory-made stone. Some monuments even align with stars and constellations, as if their builders sought to inscribe the heavens on earth. The Great Pyramid aligns with Orion's belt. Certain enclosures at Göbekli Tepe may point to celestial events. At Tiwanaku, near Puma Punku, the Kalasasaya temple tracks solstices with accuracy rivaling modern observatories. Such alignments suggest more than ritual. They may represent an attempt to track cycles, the very cycles of fire, flood, and ice that define resets. If monuments are survivors of earlier ages, then they are also guides. They stand above the soil, where floods cannot reach, where myths cannot fade, carrying fragments of a story most of history has forgotten. They remind us that humanity may have risen before, only to fall, leaving behind silent witnesses carved in stone. But stone is not the only medium of memory. Knowledge can also travel across parchment and chart, encoded in lines and coastlines rather than pillars. Just as monuments preserve fragments of science in stone, ancient maps may preserve fragments of geography from worlds drowned by rising seas. From impossible monuments, we now turn to impossible maps, charts that remember forgotten shores. On windswept plains and barren deserts, Great stones rise where they should not. They stand like guardians of forgotten ages, defying the timelines assigned to them. These monuments are more than curiosities. They are challenges, questions carved in stone. If Earth has faced thousands of resets, then perhaps these are the remnants, survivors of worlds erased. Consider Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey. Buried for millennia and only uncovered in the 1990s, it dates back at least 12,000 years, long before writing, agriculture, or settled villages were supposed to exist. Yet here we find vast stone circles, with T-shaped pillars carved with intricate animals and abstract symbols. Some weigh more than 10 tons, set upright with precision. According to conventional history, people of that time were simple hunter-gatherers. But Göbekli Tepe whispers of something more: organization, knowledge, and memory out of place in the timeline. Was it the first beginning, or the recovery of older fragments after a reset? Far away in the Andes lies Puma Punku, part of the ancient Tiwanaku complex. Its massive stone blocks, some over 100 tons, are cut with precision so fine that even a sheet of paper cannot slip between them. The shapes interlock like puzzle pieces, featuring right angles and grooves that suggest advanced tools. Yet mainstream history attributes this to people without metal tools or wheels. If that is true, then Puma Punku is either an unsolved miracle of craftsmanship or a surviving echo of technologies remembered from a cycle before. And then there is Egypt, where the Great Pyramid of Giza rises against the horizon. Its alignment with cardinal directions is almost perfect. Its base is level to within fractions of an inch. Within its geometry, some researchers see mathematical knowledge of pi, the golden ratio, even the dimensions of the Earth itself. How could such precision emerge so early in human history without precedent? Perhaps the pyramid was not only a tomb or temple, but also a message across time. A monument built to endure resets, carrying fragments of knowledge when all else was lost. Even in Europe, Stonehenge raises questions. The massive stones are aligned to mark solstices, serving as a calendar written in shadow and light. Why would early people move such colossal rocks across miles of land, if not to preserve knowledge of cycles, the very rhythms of the sun and seasons that govern survival? Each of these monuments may be seen as isolated enigmas, but together they form a pattern. Across continents and ages, humans lifted stone as if to defy the erasure of time. If floods can drown and ice can bury, stone alone might endure. These monuments, then, may be the voices of earlier ages, speaking to us from across resets. But monuments are not only on land. Some clues are drawn on parchment, preserved in ink and memory. Ancient maps hint at coastlines and continents as they were before the last floods. How could such knowledge exist, unless fragments of older worlds survived the resets? Maps are windows into how people once saw the world. They are practical tools, designed to guide ships, mark trade routes, and outline coastlines. Yet some ancient maps appear to hold knowledge that should not have been possible for the civilizations that produced them. They depict lands supposedly unknown, or coastlines shaped as they would have been before the last ice age drowned them. If Earth has faced resets, perhaps these maps are fragments of memory carried forward, copies of charts made by civilizations that no longer exist. The most famous is the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral. On its surface, it shows Europe, Africa, and South America with surprising accuracy for its age. But at the map's edge lies something astonishing: a southern landmass resembling Antarctica, centuries before its official discovery in 1820. Even more puzzling, the coastline is shown without ice, reflecting how Antarctica may have appeared tens of thousands of years ago. Piri Reis himself claimed his map was compiled from older sources, some far more ancient than Greek or Roman charts. If that is true, then who first surveyed an ice-free Antarctica? The mystery deepens with the Orontius Phineus map of 1531. It too shows Antarctica, complete with rivers and mountains hidden today beneath kilometers of ice. Modern radar surveys in the 20th century confirmed those features. Scholars who favor conventional explanations argue that these are coincidences or misinterpretations. But when multiple maps echo the same anomaly, coincidence begins to strain belief. Another enigma is the Boachi map of 1737, which portrays Antarctica not as a single frozen landmass, but as a set of islands divided by waterways. Intriguingly, this matches how the continent would have looked before it was locked under thick ice sheets. Scientists now know, from ground-penetrating radar, that Antarctica does hide valleys and channels beneath its glaciers. How could an 18th century cartographer have imagined this without access to modern instruments, unless he was drawing from older, inherited knowledge? Beyond Antarctica, there are maps of South America that seem equally ahead of their time. The rivers, mountain ranges, and coastlines in some charts display accuracy that explorers of the 16th century should not have possessed. Scholars argue these details might be errors or inspired guesses, but others wonder if they reflect fragments of much older geographic surveys, preserved and recopied across civilizations. These maps may not be singular miracles. They could be the accumulated residue of older knowledge copied through countless hands until their origin was forgotten. A Greek cartographer might have copied from a Phoenician sailor, who copied from an Egyptian scribe, who preserved fragments from a source long erased by resets. Like whispers passed through generations, the details would blur, but some truths might survive. Coastlines remembered, rivers charted, and lands outlined that official history says were never known. This possibility reframes how we see maps, not simply as records of discovery, but as time capsules. If resets erased civilizations, their survivors may have preserved scraps of knowledge in the form of charts, symbols, and coastal outlines. The maps we now find in archives could be the faint echoes of those survivors, voices across thousands of years, telling us that people once walked coastlines we consider impossible for their time. Of course, mainstream scholars offer explanations. Antarctica might be misidentified South America, or the ice-free coastlines might be the result of artistic interpretation. Yet even skeptics admit that certain details are difficult to explain. Why do multiple maps from different centuries repeat the same anomalies? Why do their coastlines sometimes match modern surveys better than they should? To look at these maps through the lens of resets is to imagine them not as anomalies, but as survivors. They are fragile proof that fragments of earlier worlds can endure, hidden in libraries and archives, misunderstood until technology allows us to see what they truly represent. They remind us that human knowledge may be older than we think, passed down in ink long after the civilizations that first measured it were erased. But maps are not the only relics that defy time. Just as coastlines appear where they should not, objects sometimes surface where they cannot belong. From gears hidden in ancient shipwrecks to mysterious spheres in the depths of the earth, the world is scattered with artifacts that seem out of place. If maps preserve memory in ink, these objects preserve memory in matter, and they too may be whispers from worlds before the last reset. If maps on parchment preserve fragments of forgotten knowledge, then artifacts in stone and metal preserve memory in matter. Across the world, scattered in caves, shipwrecks, and layers of rock, objects sometimes appear where they do not belong. They are often small, easily dismissed, sometimes controversial, yet together they form a mosaic of anomalies that challenge the neat timeline of human history. If Earth has been reset many times, these artifacts may be the survivors, clues to worlds erased, whispers from civilizations whose names we will never know. The most famous is the Antikythera mechanism, discovered in 1901 among the remains of a Roman shipwreck off the coast of Greece. For decades, it was nothing but a corroded lump of bronze, until X-rays revealed its secret. A complex assembly of interlocking gears, finely crafted, capable of predicting eclipses and charting planetary movements. Built more than 2,000 years ago, it is often called the world's first computer. Nothing like it appears again in the record for more than 1,000 years. How did such knowledge emerge, vanish, and then reappear? Was it an isolated invention, or a fragment of older science preserved through resets, resurfacing briefly before being lost again? Other anomalies stretch even deeper into time. In South Africa, miners discovered small metal spheres in layers of rock dated billions of years old. Some are natural, formed by geological processes, yet a few are strangely symmetrical, grooved as though shaped by deliberate hands. Scientists argue over their meaning, but their presence in such ancient strata raises questions we cannot easily answer. Even if natural, they remind us how easily a single artifact can blur the line between geology and technology, between chance and design. In India, ancient temples hold carvings that depict figures inside what appear to be machines. Some see images of rockets, aircraft, or vehicles that should not exist in that age. In Mesoamerican art, there are glyphs that resemble astronauts or complex devices. Mainstream scholars interpret these as symbolic, stylized myth, ritual, or imagination. But if knowledge of earlier cycles survived only as story, then perhaps these carvings are distorted echoes of real technologies seen before the last reset, transformed into mythic imagery as memory faded. Reports of out-of-place objects, ooparts as they are often called, are widespread. In coal mines, nails and small metal tools have allegedly been found embedded in rock layers millions of years old. In Russia, tiny coiled springs were discovered in sediments tens of thousands of years old. Some of these finds are hoaxes, others are misinterpretations, but the persistence of anomalies is telling. If civilizations have risen and fallen many times, then we should expect only rare survivors, often in the wrong context, stripped of their stories. And those survivors would look exactly like anomalies, puzzling fragments, impossible to place neatly on the timeline. Even more striking are the Baghdad batteries, clay jars discovered in Iraq that may date back 2,000 years. When filled with vinegar or lemon juice, they can generate a small electric current. Were they used for electroplating metals? For ritual? For something we cannot imagine? If these jars truly harnessed electricity, then they suggest knowledge of forces rediscovered only in modern times. Then there are the Nazca lines of Peru, vast geoglyphs stretching across the desert, visible only from the air. Mainstream archaeology interprets them as ritual paths or astronomical markers, yet their scale and precision suggest an understanding of landscape and geometry that feels advanced for their time. Whether created as offerings to the gods or as maps written on the land itself, they remain a puzzle. Artifacts too large to hold, etched into the earth. What unites these scattered anomalies is their isolation. Each can be explained away individually. A coincidence, a hoax, a misinterpretation. But together they form a pattern of disruption in the tidy story of human progress. They are reminders that the earth is an eraser, and that resets scatter knowledge like broken shards. What survives will never look like a complete picture. It will look like puzzle pieces without a box, fragments without context. To hold such an artifact in hand, a gear that should not exist, a tool buried in impossible layers, a carving that seems too modern, is to feel the breath of forgotten ages. They are quiet voices saying, "We were here, we built, we knew." But the earth reset, and most of us were lost. And when matter is erased, when stone and metal are broken or buried, another kind of memory endures. Stories, myths, songs whispered from parent to child. If artifacts are fragments of technology, then myths are fragments of culture. Both may be echoes of civilizations erased by resets. From impossible objects, we now turn to impossible stories, the myths that remember. Long before clay tablets were etched or papyrus was inked, humanity carried its history in the fragile medium of story. Around fires, in ritual chants, or whispered across generations, myths became humanity's first archive. To the modern eye, they appear as allegory or fantasy. Yet when myths repeat across continents, when floods, fires, and endless winters appear in cultures that never met, we must ask, are these merely symbols, or are they memories of real resets preserved in story form? The Aztecs believed the world had already been destroyed and remade 4 times, each age ending in disaster. The first sun fell to jaguars, the second to hurricanes, the third to fire, and the fourth to floods. Humanity now lives in the 5th sun, destined too for collapse. This cyclical vision of resets mirrors the Hindu concept of the yugas, vast cosmic ages where civilizations rise and fall, each ending in destruction before renewal. In Norse mythology, Ragnarok brings both fire and ice, Surtur the fire giant igniting the heavens, while Fimbulwinter blankets the land in snow. Yet even Ragnarok is not final. After fire and frost, green fields return, and humanity begins again. Flood stories are among the most universal. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest surviving texts, tells of Utnapishtim, who built a boat to survive a divine flood. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah repeats the same role, carrying pairs of animals across the waters. In India, the sage Manu is guided by a divine fish to build his ark. The Greeks tell of Deucalion and Pyrrha, who repopulated the earth after Zeus's flood. Among the Polynesians, myths speak of islands swallowed by the ocean. Even the Cherokee and Ojibwe of North America recall waters that rose until mountaintops were islands. When stories across continents echo so precisely, it suggests they may be collective memories of post-Ice Age floods that drowned coastlines worldwide. Fire, too, burns through global mythology. Among certain Native American traditions, fire fell from the sky, destroying villages and forests. In Central American myth, earlier worlds ended in flames. In Hindu cosmology, Shiva's dance of destruction is fire that clears the stage for renewal. And in Norse sagas, Surtur's sword brings the heavens down in fire. These fiery images align with what science now suspects: cosmic impacts or massive eruptions that cloaked the skies in ash and set continents aflame. Could these myths encode the trauma of survivors who lived through Younger Dryas firestorms or the after effects of volcanic winters? Even endless winter appears in the stories of the past. Norse myths describe Fimbulwinter, 3 years of unbroken cold before the world's rebirth. Some native traditions recall suns that vanished, leaving only snow and hunger. These align with geological evidence of sudden cooling periods, such as the Younger Dryas, when ice advanced abruptly, throwing humanity back into survival mode. What gives myths their power is endurance. Cities crumble, artifacts corrode, but stories adapt and survive. They shift in detail but preserve their core. The world ends, survivors endure, renewal follows. The Aztecs turned it into suns, the Hindus into yugas, the Norse into Ragnarok, the Hebrews into flood. Each tradition encodes catastrophe in a way its people could remember and pass on. Modern scholars often treat myths as allegories, symbolic lessons about morality or natural forces. But the pattern of similarity across the globe hints at more. Myths may be humanity's longest-running record of resets, memory made narrative, trauma turned into story so it would not be forgotten. Survivors may not have preserved monuments or machines, but they preserved meaning. This has happened before. It will happen again. Consider this. If our world ended tomorrow, what would endure longer, our fragile machines or our stories retold as legends by survivors? If resets erase matter, then culture may survive only as myth. The tale of a great fire might once have described a comet. The legend of endless snow may have been the memory of volcanic ash. The flood myth may be the echo of rising seas. In this way, myths bridge the gap between evidence and silence. Where archaeology falters and geology grows cold, myth carries memory in warmth and voice. Together, they suggest that resets are not speculation, but part of humanity's lived past. Yet myths are not the only evidence. Science itself, cautious and skeptical, has begun to uncover patterns in ice cores, sediments, and genetics that echo the rhythms of catastrophe. Where myth speaks of fire, flood, and frost, science finds ash layers, impact debris, and genetic bottlenecks. From the realm of stories, we now move into the realm of data, the science of forgotten ages. When we leave behind the realm of myth and step into the language of science, the story of resets does not vanish. It simply takes on another form, written not in symbols or gods, but in ice cores, sediments, fossils, and even the DNA inside our bodies. Though cautious and conservative, science has quietly uncovered patterns that echo the ancient stories: abrupt climate shifts, sudden die-offs, genetic bottlenecks, and anomalies in the archaeological record. If myths are the memory of resets in story, then science is their memory in data. One of the clearest archives lies in ice cores, drilled deep into Greenland and Antarctica. Each layer of ice is a frozen page, preserving bubbles of ancient air. By studying their chemistry, scientists reconstruct past climates. What they find is not steady change but abrupt upheavals. The Younger Dryas, beginning about 12,800 years ago, shows up in these cores as a sudden plunge in temperature. Within decades, the span of a single lifetime, the northern hemisphere froze again, glaciers advanced, and ecosystems collapsed. The mythic memory of endless winter, like the Norse Fimbul winter, finds a mirror here in science. Sediment cores tell a similar tale. In layers dated to extinction events, scientists find sharp bands of unusual material: iridium from asteroid impacts, layers of volcanic ash, or flood deposits that show catastrophic inundation. The thin line of iridium marking the Chicxulub asteroid is one such page, preserved in rocks across the globe. In North America, sediments reveal colossal floods at the end of the Ice Age, when glacial dams burst and walls of water scoured the land, natural evidence of the floods remembered in story. Our own bodies preserve a trace of resets. Geneticists studying the human genome have discovered what is known as the Toba bottleneck. Around 74,000 years ago, humanity's genetic diversity shrank dramatically, suggesting our ancestors were reduced to only a few thousand individuals. This aligns with the Toba supereruption in Indonesia, which may have dimmed the sun and starved ecosystems. To carry such a small population through such a dark age is to walk on the knife's edge of extinction. If cultures and civilizations existed before, their memory would have died with those who perished, leaving only a faint genetic scar as evidence. Yet science is not only about catastrophes, it also grapples with anomalies. Archaeology, for example, is filled with puzzles. The sudden rise of agriculture around 10,000 years ago, the abrupt appearance of writing and cities in Mesopotamia, the advanced engineering at sites like Göbekli Tepe and Puma Punku. Mainstream explanations describe these as natural progressions, but they can also be read as recoveries, the rapid rebuilding of knowledge after resets. When a fire burns down a library, the next generation does not start from zero. It salvages scraps of memory and reconstructs. Might the leaps in our timeline reflect the same process on a civilizational scale? Geology, too, reveals hints of resets in patterns called Milankovitch cycles, the rhythmic variations in Earth's orbit and tilt that drive ice ages. These cycles show that catastrophic climate shifts are not random but inevitable. Every few tens of thousands of years, conditions tilt the planet toward glaciation or warming. For civilizations dependent on stable climate, such cycles would have been existential threats. The ruins of forgotten societies may now lie under deserts created by orbital shifts or beneath seas that rose when glaciers retreated. Even modern technology has revealed forgotten landscapes. LiDAR surveys, laser scans that penetrate jungle canopies, have uncovered vast networks of ancient cities in Central and South America, far larger and more complex than anyone expected. These findings show how easily entire civilizations can be hidden in plain sight, erased by forest and time. If societies this advanced were lost only 1,000 years ago, how many more from 10,000 years ago could remain invisible beneath oceans or deserts? Skeptics argue that resets in human prehistory are speculative, yet science already accepts them in natural history. Extinctions, glaciations, eruptions, and impacts are undeniable. The step not yet taken is to apply the same framework to civilization. But if humanity is part of nature, why would we be exempt from the same rhythms that erased and remade countless species? Perhaps the greatest convergence of myth and science comes when both point to the same events. Myths speak of floods, and geology reveals drowned coastlines. Myths speak of fire from the heavens, and sediments reveal impact debris. Myths speak of endless winters, and ice cores record sudden chills. Each tradition alone may be incomplete, but together they form a tapestry. The story of resets is not a fantasy. It is written in both memory and matter. Science, cautious as it is, has not yet redrawn history to include lost civilizations. But it has provided the framework that makes them plausible. Catastrophic events, sudden climate swings, fragile survivals, and anomalies that do not fit the official story. It is the bridge between myth and archaeology, between imagination and evidence. If science shows us the fingerprints of forgotten ages, then what happened after the silence? How did survivors, scattered and fragile, turn sparks of memory into the sudden blaze of civilization? From data in ice and stone, we now return to the human story, the great return after silence. After the fires had burned out, after the floods had receded, after the long winters of ash and ice had finally released their grip, humanity found itself standing on the edge of silence. For generations, survival had been the only task. The great stories, the technologies, the monuments of the past, all had been broken, drowned, or forgotten. What remained were fragments, skills half remembered, myths retold, and sparks of knowledge carried in memory. From these fragments, new beginnings emerged. What looks to us like a sudden leap forward may in truth be the slow, fragile return after silence. One of the clearest examples is the agricultural revolution. Around 10,000 years ago, in multiple parts of the world, people began to cultivate plants and domesticate animals. In Mesopotamia, wheat and barley grew in the fertile floodplains. In China, rice and millet became staples. In Mesoamerica, maize was shaped from its wild ancestor, teosinte. In Africa, yams and sorghum were tamed. The remarkable fact is not just that farming appeared, but that it appeared almost simultaneously in places separated by oceans. Was this mere coincidence? Or does it suggest that people across the world were rediscovering a skill once known, carried in memory through the dark centuries of resets? The rise of cities followed swiftly. In Mesopotamia, Uruk emerged with monumental temples and complex bureaucracy. In the Indus Valley, cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa appeared with grid-planned streets, drainage systems, and standardized weights. In Egypt, pyramids rose from the desert, aligned with the stars. In China, walled settlements flourished along the Yellow River. These civilizations did not creep into existence slowly. They arrived already complex, as if memory had guided their construction. Archaeology shows little gradual build-up to such sophistication. Instead, the record looks like a flame bursting suddenly from embers long smouldering. Artifacts hint at this process of recovery. At Göbekli Tepe, stone circles with intricate carvings predate agriculture, suggesting that symbolic and architectural knowledge survived even before farming took root. The builders were technically still hunter-gatherers, yet they organized labor to raise megaliths weighing tons. How could people leap so quickly from small bands to monumental projects? Perhaps because they remembered, not in detail, but in fragments, the skills of ancestors who had lived before resets. Myths also carry this theme of return. The Aztec five suns describes cycles of destruction and rebirth, each age ending in catastrophe but giving rise to the next. Hindu cosmology speaks of yugas, cosmic ages that follow one another in endless succession. These traditions do not imagine a single dawn of humanity, but many. They echo the possibility that resets have erased civilizations repeatedly, and that each time survivors lit the flame again. Science provides evidence of this rhythm. Around 74,000 years ago, the Toba eruption nearly extinguished humanity. Genetic studies suggest a bottleneck, reducing our ancestors to a few thousand individuals. Yet from that near extinction, humanity recovered, eventually spreading across every continent. Around 12,800 years ago, during the Younger Dryas, sudden cooling and firestorms devastated ecosystems. Yet within a few thousand years, agriculture and civilization bloomed. These are not steady climbs, but cycles of collapse and return, erasure and rediscovery. The return after silence also explains why technologies sometimes appear without precedent. Writing in Mesopotamia emerges fully formed in cuneiform tablets. Metallurgy arrives with surprising speed. Astronomy appears in stone circles aligned to solstices. These do not look like inventions out of nothing, but like recoveries. Fragments of knowledge resurfacing when conditions allowed stability. Just as survivors of a fire might salvage books from ashes, survivors of resets may have salvaged ideas from memory, myth, or scattered artifacts. Consider how knowledge behaves today. If global catastrophe struck, destroying electricity and the internet, much of our scientific detail would be lost within a generation. But fragments would survive. A story of machines that flew in the sky, a scrap of paper describing electricity, a ruined observatory aligned with stars. Centuries later, descendants might rebuild from these fragments, seeming to leap forward suddenly. Our own timeline may be the same, not a straight ascent, but a spiral of forgetting and remembering. This perspective casts the first great civilizations in a new light. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the pyramids of Egypt, the planned cities of the Indus Valley. Perhaps they were not humanity's first attempt, but humanity's first recovery after the last great silence. Their achievements may represent not invention, but remembrance. The return after silence is humbling. It suggests that our present is not unique, but one iteration in a cycle far older than we admit. Each age rises on the ashes of the last, carrying forward sparks of memory while losing most of the flame. Civilization, then, is less a ladder than a rhythm, a series of pulses where memory and silence alternate. If that is true, then what we call the birth of civilization may be only the latest rebirth after resets. And if humanity has returned many times before, the silence will come again. The question is not whether, but when. And what sparks of our age will survive into the next return? Look around our world today. To us, it feels permanent, indestructible, even infinite. Cities glow across the continents like constellations on Earth. Networks pulse with electricity and data. Satellites drift above our heads, and aircraft cross the skies like migrating birds of steel. But if history has taught anything, it is this: permanence is an illusion. If Earth has faced countless resets before, then there is no reason to believe we are exempt. In fact, our modern civilization may be more fragile than any that came before. Our age depends on delicate balances. Food comes from complex agricultural systems that rely on steady climates, predictable rains, and fragile topsoil. Energy comes from grids and pipelines stretched across continents, vulnerable to disruption. Trade connects every corner of the planet, but this very interdependence means a fracture in one place ripples everywhere. Technology dazzles us with power, but it is sustained by supply chains, rare minerals, and fragile infrastructure. A volcanic winter, a sudden impact, or even a disruption to global trade could cripple this system within weeks. We've seen smaller versions of collapse in history. The Maya, who built soaring pyramids and mapped the stars, fell into silence after drought and political conflict unraveled their society. The Indus Valley civilization, with its carefully planned cities and sophisticated drainage, vanished mysteriously, leaving behind only bricks and undeciphered symbols. Even mighty Rome, with its legions and laws, fragmented into pieces, its roads and aqueducts crumbling into ruin. Each thought itself eternal. Each discovered it was not. In our own time, the fragility is visible. Climate change is already reshaping coastlines and weather patterns. Seas are rising at an accelerating rate, threatening coastal cities where hundreds of millions live. Storms grow stronger, droughts more persistent, forests burn hotter and longer. Imagine a century of this compounded, not gradual, but abrupt. Our global cities, clustered along the edges of oceans, may face the same fate as Dwarka or Pavlopetri, swallowed by the sea in a reset of slow inevitability. And then there are threats beyond climate. Volcanoes like Yellowstone in the United States or Campi Flegrei in Italy still sleep uneasily. A super eruption would not simply devastate a region, it would inject ash into the stratosphere, dimming sunlight across the globe. Crops would fail, ecosystems collapse, and famine would spread. Humanity might survive, but civilization as we know it could falter. From the skies, the threat remains as it always has. Thousands of near-Earth asteroids are tracked, but many more drift unseen. A body only a kilometre across could plunge the planet into darkness, while something larger could cause extinction. Science reassures us with probabilities. The chance is small, they say, but history reminds us it has already happened. Chicxulub reset the age of the dinosaurs. Why should we assume we are immune to another such strike? Even without natural forces, humanity itself has created new risks. Nuclear weapons hold the power to end cities in moments. A full-scale conflict could dim skies with soot just as surely as a volcanic eruption. Global pandemics remind us how swiftly disease can travel, exploiting the very networks we celebrate as progress. Our technologies of connection double as pathways of collapse. And yet, for all this fragility, there is resilience too. Humanity has endured resets before. After silence, we return. If catastrophe struck tomorrow, survivors might carry fragments of our world, stories of glowing towers, flying machines, and invisible networks of knowledge. To their descendants, these might sound like myths. 1,000 years later, archaeologists might uncover skyscraper foundations or corroded satellites, puzzling over how such things existed in so ancient a time. Our age, too, would be remembered as legend. This thought humbles us. We often believe ourselves unique, the pinnacle of progress, the end of the story. But perhaps we are only the latest verse in a song the earth has sung many times. If civilizations before us have risen, flourished, and fallen to resets, then we too stand on that edge. The present age is not outside the cycle, it is caught within it. The earth continues to move through its rhythms, warming and cooling, quaking and erupting, spinning under skies filled with cosmic debris. Our technologies do not shield us from these forces, they only give us the illusion of control. And so the question lingers, what fragments of us will endure if the next reset comes? Will our skyscrapers be remembered like pyramids, our satellites mistaken for fallen stars, our myths told of an age when humans touched the sky? From the fragility of our present, we step into the final reflection, that Earth's story is not a line with an end, but an endless book, its pages turned by fire, flood, ice, and silence. Picture the Earth not as a stage for a single play, but as a vast book with countless pages. Some pages are written in fire, others in flood, others in ice. Many are torn, scorched, or drowned, but the book continues, cycling through stories older than memory. If Earth has faced thousands of resets, then our civilization is only one fragile chapter, pressed lightly on the surface of this endless tome. Geologists read its pages in stone and ice. In thin layers of ash, they see volcanoes that blackened skies for years. In seams of iridium, they find the fingerprints of cosmic impacts. In fossils, they trace the sudden disappearance of species, followed by slow resurgences of life. Each layer is a reminder that the Earth is not steady, but restless. Each record speaks of resets, great and small. Archaeologists encounter the same rhythm in human history: civilizations that appear, flourish, then vanish, leaving behind ruins swallowed by jungle, sands, or sea. Languages rise and die. Monuments crack and sink. What survives is fragmentary: a tablet, a shard, a myth, a star-aligned circle of stones. These fragments are the faint ink of earlier cycles, scattered across the margins of the book. Even myths carried through memory belong to this book. The story of the flood in Mesopotamia, mirrored in India, Greece, and the Pacific. The Norse tale of Ragnarok, echoing with fire and ice. The Aztec vision of suns rising and falling in succession. Each myth is a page, preserved in voice rather than stone, reminding us that endings are never final, that resets are not erasures, but renewals. And so we arrive at a humbling perspective. What we call history may not be a single narrative at all, but only the latest layer written on an endless palimpsest. Behind our words are erased legacies, folded time, civilizations glowing faintly like ruins beneath the sea. We are not the first. We will not be the last. Perhaps one day, long after our cities have crumbled and our satellites have fallen, others will walk the earth. They may find fragments of us, a shard of glass melted into stone, a faint trace of carbon in the soil, a myth of towers that touch the sky. They will wonder, as we do now, how many resets have come before and how many more will come after. The Book of Earth is still being written, but never with permanence. Every age is a draft. Every chapter can be torn away. What matters is that the cycle continues. Silence, renewal, and return. And so, as we close this reflection, we return to the thought that began it all. Resets are not ends, but beginnings. Each time Earth turns the page, life endures, memory lingers, and a new story begins, folded over the old. We are only one layer in an endless rhythm, part of a book too vast for any of us to read in full. Where are you listening from tonight, and at what time? Perhaps your answer too will become a fragment in this endless book, a small mark carried across the cycles of silence and return.